Direct to Science, a podcast by NAWA, the Polish National Agency for Academic Exchange.
There seems to be no question of internationalization of science. It has to. It is international. These are nice words, but how to make it really happen? How to transform the idea of cooperation into real, practical steps and actions that, at the end of the day, would translate into support for researchers. Participants of the conference Transnational Science Cooperation, Fostering Collaborative Research in Europe and Poland met in Brussels to discuss these issues.
Krzysztof Pyrć, I'm a full professor at the Jagiellonian University in Krakow, Poland, but I'm also president-elect of the Foundation for Polish Science, which is the oldest Polish scientific foundation.
What is the role of independent or extra-institutional funding in support of Polish science?
I would like to actually refer to a broader perspective. If you would look at Europe and the funding of science in Europe, you would see that there is a Horizon Europe. There are many national initiatives, many organizations under governments, under the European Parliament. But actually the organization that supports the blue sky research, that is actually supporting development of completely novel technologies. It's called ERC, European Research Council. And actually, this is not fully independent organization, but it's an organization that is pretty autonomous. So the organization that supports basic research, but only the breakthrough basic research. It's independent from current needs of politicians, current trends. It's looking for excellence and for things that are completely new. So if you would think about scientific research, and if you would look in applied research, you would see that we can commercialize some scientific results. And then we can use these results in technology, in military even. But when we move a bit earlier, when you look at the research itself, like basic research, you would see that while applied research is for needs of the society right now, the basic research is for the needs of the society in 10 or 20 years. So if we try to solve our problems from today with the basic research, in 10 years, we'll have no solution for the problems in the future. So the basic research is actually providing us with the toolbox, and we take the things out of this toolbox to solve our problems today, but we need to create this toolbox. And actually, this independence of the research funding organization is building this capacity, because we, as Foundation for Polish Science, we are independent. We are looking the same as ERC. We're looking for excellence. We are looking for the things that may change the future, but not maybe today, but the future in 10 or 20 years. We are investing in technologies that are not trendy. We are investing in technologies that have the potential to reshape our world. And what you would see at how technology was developing in the past, you would see that we can go in this incremental way, only using applied research. We can improve the technologies that we have, but then we would never have internet. We would never have space technologies. We would never have new drugs. That's the kind of research that independent agencies can support and do support. So I do believe that this independence is something that is building our capacity as the society.
So the importance is obvious, as it provides the basis for any future applied science. Therefore, it has to be renewed all the time. But where should the money come from? Because the bottom line is always the money.
That's a very, very difficult question, because obviously we as Foundation for Polish Science, we do own some of our own money, but we don't have the capacity to fund this research. And you may say why the independent organizations should distribute the public money. But this is not about the freedom to spend public money. It's about identifying the excellence. And that's how it should be perceived. As Foundation for Polish Science, we are distributing some of the European funds, but actually we don't get this money to our pockets. Actually, we do add from our own pot, from our iron capital, we add some money to be able to do it in a really good way and to support excellence. So if you're asking where the money should come from, well, the same pot as every other money. We should just look at it as the capacity, not independence in terms of what we do, whatever we want. It's independence, so we are independent from the political storms, we are independent from the trends, we are independent from many things that would bias our judgment. So yes, if we as society would like to have our money spent well, we should use this kind of independent agencies because, of course, this should be controlled because there is always a risk of abuse, which is wrong. But we should use these agencies to identify excellence, and then we can use different mechanisms of controlling that this money is well spent. But this should be, in my opinion, coming from the public money. And I do believe, looking at the ERC, that this is the most effective way of spending this money.
My name is Justyna Olko. I work at the University of Warsaw, where I direct the Center for Research and Practice in Cultural Continuity. I am also ambassador for the ERC representing Poland.
So let's talk about ERC. How do you assess Poland's performance concerning grants provided by ERC or in the context of ERC activities?
In my opinion, we should speak about underperformance because the number of ERC grants doesn't really reflect the potential and scientific capital of Poland and Polish researchers. We've had a number of grants representing almost all disciplines, with some disciplines presented much better than others, but it's still far from the results achieved by other large European countries. And the reasons are complex. In my perspectives, there are internal constraints and also potentially some external obstacles. In the case of the latter, I think about potential unconscious biases toward researchers from the so-called widening countries. And I hope this is a problem that will be tackled by the ERC, by panelists. And the second, I think, more tangible and obvious constraint is in Poland, and it is also multifaceted because I see it as still not sufficient professional administrative support for developing competitive ERC proposals. There have been some really great initiatives from which I benefited myself, like the Office for Scientific Excellence by the Polish Academy of Sciences that has been successfully supporting ERC applicants. But we need more support in the institutional level. So with the help of national contact points and the initiatives they have been developing, for example, workshops, trainings, expert advice, we need more diversified, decentralized support. Right now, it's mainly focusing on administrative issues, budget construction, and even here we've had some concerns, at least in my case or the case of my colleagues. I'm talking about more professional support in writing, composition of a competitive proposal, how to present our ideas, our research in ways that will secure funding. So far, different institutions and also individual applicants have been relying on informal support of ERC panel members from Poland and abroad, and also ERC grantees. So we've been involved in this quite informally, and obviously the number of persons and the number of applications we can support is very limited because we are doing this in the so-called free time, and this is not how the system should be organized. I know that my colleagues abroad have much better professional institutional support, and it's simply easier to write a good proposal. These constraints are also manifest at the phase of implementation of ERC grants. The conditions have generally improved since I had my first ERC grant in 2012. Then it was really difficult and I had to spend a lot of time on administrative hurdles. Now it's easier, but it doesn't mean it's super easy because Polish institutions have built a number of rules and constraints just in case not to have problems with ERC European audits or to sort of make themselves more secure against different regulations, whereas these regulations are in many cases super simple. And ERC relies in many aspects of grant implementation on internal regulations of host institutions. So these regulations should be simplified in order to make the life of ERC grantees easier. And I think many people who have been close to ERC projects and have seen how difficult it is sometimes to carry out the project simply became discouraged in their own career paths. They became discouraged and they don't want to apply themselves because they know what it can potentially imply. Another factor, I think, is that there is plenty of funding available in Poland that goes to experienced researchers rather than being mostly directed to younger generations or early stage researchers. This has made, in my opinion, some of experienced researchers quite lazy in terms of applying for funding because it's easier for them to get National Science Center grant than to write a competitive ERC proposal. So I'm not saying funding in Poland should be less available. It should be available, but it should rather be more easily available to early stage researchers so that they can get enough experience to become later eligible for European funding.
So you actually already gave your recommendations when you listed the issues, but the key question is, how would you achieve it and who should implement those changes?
In the case of Poland, these changes should be both top-down, and I would also think about more grassroots initiatives or more grassroots involvement. Regarding top-down initiatives, as ambassadors for the ERC, along with Professor Michał Tomza, we've began talking to central institutions such as National Contact Point. We also plan to address the Ministry of Science to convince them to boost their support for ERC applicants. We've had some very good conversations with the National Contact Point. We know what we would like to do together within what is possible in our areas of activities, but we also need some central decisions regarding research policy in Poland and how Poland would like to address the underperformance with European funding, mainly ERC, but also there is underperformance in other programs too, which is reflected, for example, in a limited number of ERC consortium projects coordinated by Polish institutions. Then there is the problem with institutional support. We cannot influence the policy of individual universities or institutes. We can provide recommendations and share good practices, also the practices that have been developed by competitive research institutions in Western Europe. Of course, in our case with Professor Tomza, we need to start with our own university, which is by no means an easy task. There has not been very much interest in our own institution after granting us the mission, the role of ERC grantees, and I hope this will change because the only two ambassadors representing Poland are based in the University of Warsaw. So I would say this is an obligation for our university also to improve and perform better towards supporting ERC applicants. We could easily get many more ERC grants than we currently do. And finally, there should be more encouragement to researchers at all stages eligible for ERC funding, but especially toward more experienced researchers who, in my opinion, have the duty to support younger researchers by forming teams, forming good working conditions, and enabling early-stage researchers to start their own research paths. So I would really like to encourage to apply for ERC, despite all the difficulties and hurdles. It's worth it. It's the sense of academic freedom and also the trust that this institution has in researchers. This is something that has been personally very important to me, trust and freedom that's given to an individual researcher, what this person is going to do with the project. Even, some really huge changes can be made during the project if it's necessary, if it's justified. It's the only funding of that kind, I think, that exists.
Manuel Heitor, mechanical engineer by training. I'm a professor at the University of Lisbon at the Center for Innovation, Technology and Policy Research. I spent about 13 years in the Portuguese government as Secretary of State and then as Minister for Science and Higher Education. And I've been very much involved always for building a better and stronger Europe.
But a stronger Europe also in terms of international science. If you could kind of envisage the ideal international cooperation or the mechanisms, how would you proceed or how would you develop this transnational scientific cooperation?
One with excellent research careers and essentially good quality of research jobs. And this requires adequate funding levels. We should note that Europe is definitely, and we know it today more than ever, Europe is the most reliable partner at the world level and is the most efficient per resources involved because of our diversity. But at the same time, by being proud to be European and of the European project, we need to recognize that Europe is falling behind, particularly of an accumulation of low levels of investment in R&D for several decades. Lagging behind in terms of our global competitors, definitely the United States forever, but now also lagging behind compared with China. And researchers and support staff are always in the center of a scientific community. And therefore, you need to provide good research careers and adequate research careers. In Europe, because of the low levels of investment, there was a trend in the last 2 decades to adopt what I will call a very bad practice of contracting young researchers as a function of project duration, because most of the institutions, universities, research and technology institutions, and firms, particularly small firms, are very much dependent on projects, short-term projects. And this has induced a bad practice of recruiting researchers as a function of project duration. We need to break this bad practice, provide better research careers. Certainly this needs more funds, but also needs a new institutional behavior and new attitudes within the research and scientific communities and in general within the innovation communities to guarantee better jobs for the youngsters. We need to guarantee, above all, better research careers and faster research careers for the talent. And in another way, I will conclude by, we need first and foremost to turn the existing European brain drain to the United States over the last 20 years to an European brain gain. And this requires better research careers, which per se requires adequate funding and governance systems.
Exactly, that's the point. I mean, because careers or people follow the money. The project-based careers were the reflection of the way the money was distributed. So where the money for those careers should come from? The governments, the European institutions, because we know that private sector would still continue to work on projects.
Public investment, either at a national or European level, is absolutely critical. It has been in other parts of the world, in the United States, in China, and it has also been in Europe. We know that public, either at a national or regional or a European level, is absolutely critical. Certainly needs to be complemented with private funding, but we need to be aware that without a strong level of public investment, we cannot build a reliable and strong research and innovation context. There is only one area probably where the business expenditure is larger than the public one in Europe, which is in the biomedical area. And we see the consequences, certainly. In one way, you should be very proud by the advancements, for instance, in cancer treatments, particularly in pharma oriented to non-curable diseases. But at the same time, the price of those treatments are unacceptable high because of lack of public investment, and most of the investment is done and controlled by a small number of very large pharma companies. So we know, even in the areas where we have a very large investment of private, we need always to increase public expenditure, because public or private, they don't replace each other, they complement, and they are very important. So Europe is lagging behind public and private, but at this moment, when we look at the quality of jobs and the quality of research careers, we are essentially speaking about the need for public expenditure, either at the regional or a national or at European level.
If we are talking about the public spending, then we are talking about national budgets. And there I see a tension between transnational cooperation or internationalization of science and national funding that would lead to renationalization of research. How to overcome this tension?
We have done that in Europe, and we have good examples. Particularly the building up of the European Research Council in 2007, after more than 5 years of discussion, has been the best example of building a strong European program, the European Research Council. So let's go to use those lessons learned. Certainly the budget derives from national budgets, but we have already been able to build a very strong European governance, particularly for basic science. It can and should be enlarged. It can and should be increased independence. But at the end of the day, we know how to do a large European program which keeps basic research at the top world level through an European program. Now, the budgets are certainly national budgets, and this brings a key discussion, actually following President von der Leyen's speech in the budget conference 2 weeks ago. We need what she calls new European own resources. Why? Because the taxpayer contribution is not enough. So if we need more investment, more public investment, we need to get the money from financial markets. And that again has been done in the post-COVID area to build the recovery and resilience facilities. So we have experiences. We have excellent experiences in Europe of governance, like the European Research Council. We have excellent experiences of building a public procurement system in the vaccines after the COVID. And we have an excellent example of going to the financial markets to build the recovery and resilience facility after COVID. So let's use those good lessons and build it and increase the investment by going to the financial market, by getting and attracting new European owned resources, and develop a new governance systems at an European level without the supervision of finance ministers and of this idea of not allowing for debt.
Hi, I'm Christine Durinx. I'm the managing director of VIB. VIB is a life science research institute in Flanders, Belgium.
What are the main risks of rising populism and anti-global tendencies for scientific research and scientific collaborations?
I mainly see 3 big risks. So today we are talking a lot about brain mobility. So I think there is a risk for the flow of knowledge, the flow of talent. There is also a risk, and that's more on a longer term, is about tackling global challenges, because therefore we really need coordinated scientific efforts. And there is also the question of values and ideology. So if we look at the first one of the talent flow, of course, so in our institute we bring together 75 nationalities, so we really rely on talent coming from everywhere to build strong teams. And if scientists can't access anymore our labs, collaborate with other international teams, or come to conferences, then progress is slowing. And this is really something that is really immediate. Because of Of course, populist policies, they often emphasize tighter immigration controls, for example. They protect local labor. And then you have the other side. If countries are affected by rising populism, then the scientists may leave. They may want to go somewhere else, because we actually see it currently in the US. There is a much more hostile academic environment. So in that case, the country is really losing talent. It's a question of short term, but it's also something about the long term. And then if we look at the delay in addressing global challenges, is what we also see is that funding is reduced for these big international endeavors, such as climate change, public health, pandemic preparedness, space research, because there is a prioritization of domestic concerns. So that's maybe not something where we see the results today, but it's on the longer term, certainly. And this will, of course, lead to increased human, but also economic costs. And then I think something that is very also dear to my heart is the shift in ideology. There is a certain erosion of trust and an erosion of shared norms. So trust is something that is really essential in science. You need to trust your collaborative partners. You need to trust the data you receive. There is also purely the side of equity, diversity, and inclusion. We now see that we're stepping years back in something that we thought was a shared norm or a shared value. And then if we look at other really difficult sides, things like censorship or suppression, total suppression of science. So we're really looking from immediate disruptions to more long-term systemic trusts, and we really need to maintain open international scientific exchange to maintain innovation and the progress.
It's not the role of scientific community to counter those social developments, but still, scientific community and science support institutions can mitigate the results and can find answers to those challenges. So how do you think that the answers should look like?
Yeah, so there I think we really need a multifaceted approach. So first of all, we're scientists, we're defending scientists, and we need to defend and promote the scientific values. And if I look at the scientific values, it's scientific integrity, it's open inquiry, but it's also openly sharing data, sharing knowledge, but also sharing infrastructure, for example, so that we make sure that everybody can access and that knowledge remains global. There is also an element of communicated the value of science. So if we see recent developments, we realize that the public doesn't always understand why science is so important. So engaging, and that research institutes can do on behalf of the scientists. Many scientists like to engage with the public or with journalists about what they're doing, why are they doing it. But we shouldn't underestimate the importance of outreach and also science literacy. I think we need to resist politicization. So at VIB, we have very many nationalities together, but we'll need to give an open environment where people can discuss in all respect and learn of each other's perspectives. I think it's essential that we build very strong international networks and diverse networks. We've probably been focusing a lot on a very limited number of partners. And we can trust our scientists to build those networks. So we can do it at level of institute, but also encourage our scientists to go out and to collaborate. So for me, the scientific community really needs to defend openness and should also be architects of resilience.
You have been listening to Direct to Science, a podcast by NAWA, the Polish National Agency for Academic Exchange. It was a free-range production.